Your patio may be too small for an orchard, but it is not too small for fresh summer fruit. And the biggest mistake is treating every sunny corner and every fruit container as if summer affects them the same way. Look at a small patio in July. The concrete is warm before lunch. A west-facing wall keeps throwing heat back long after the sun has moved. There is a narrow strip beside the railing, a low, empty edge under a table, and perhaps one bare fence or trellis line that seems too thin to matter. At first, none of this looks like fruit growing space. It looks like the place where you set a chair, stack a watering can, and tell yourself that strawberries are probably the only fruit small enough to try. But that patio already contains several different growing conditions. The low edge may stay cooler than the exposed center. A large container holds moisture differently from a hanging pot. A warm wall may be a burden for one berry and useful to another fruit. And the empty space above your head is still space, even if you cannot set another pot on the floor. So, the goal is not to cram 13 plants onto a tiny slab of concrete. The goal is to give each fruit a job. Some stay low, some become compact bushes, some grow on canes. A few become small trees in large pots. Others use a trellis and take the harvest upward. Keep that bare vertical edge in mind, because we will come back to it near the end. And as we move through this patio, notice one rule. The plant label is only the beginning. The real decision is how the roots, the container, the afternoon heat, and your watering routine work together. A crop that performs beautifully in a cool coastal summer may struggle on an inland patio surrounded by brick. A fruit that loves warmth in the ground can still suffer when its root ball is trapped in a small, dark pot that heats and dries quickly. The smartest place to start is not with a tree. It is with a fruit plant low enough to fit beneath almost everything else. Start with Everbearing strawberries. Picture the first morning when one berry is fully red, two are still coloring, and several small green fruits are waiting behind them. That is the kind of patio harvest people remember. Not a giant basket all at once, but a reason to step outside again tomorrow. Then 2 days later, and notice what changed. The word Everbearing can create the wrong expectation. It does not mean the plant is guaranteed to be covered in ripe berries every day of summer. Fruiting pattern depends on the cultivar, temperature, plant health, and other growing conditions. What it can give you is more than one picking opportunity when the plant is managed well. That fits a patio perfectly, because a few ripe berries at arm's reach can be more enjoyable than one large harvest you barely had space to grow. But strawberries expose the first weakness of summer containers. Shallow roots leave less room for watering mistakes. Do not wait until the entire plant collapses before you remember the watering can. Push a finger about 1 inch into the growing mix and learn how the container feels when the upper layer begins to dry. For a small pot, you can also lift it. A noticeably lighter container is giving you information before the leaves become dramatic. When you water, wet the root zone thoroughly and make sure the drainage holes are actually working. A decorative pot that holds water around the roots is not an upgrade just because it looks better. On the other hand, a tiny strawberry planter that dries hard, receives a heavy soaking, and dries hard again can create a stressful cycle. The goal is not permanent sogginess. The goal is avoiding repeated extremes. A 1 to 2 inch layer of clean organic mulch can help reduce evaporation where the container design allows it. Keep that material away from the crown. The strawberry crown should not be buried under wet mix or mulch. It is a small detail, but this is exactly why a patio garden becomes easier when you stop treating every plant like a tomato. Then harvest with the same attention. Pick ripe fruit regularly. Remove damaged berries instead of letting them soften against wet foliage. Look under leaves. The plant often hides the best fruit where a casual glance misses it. Strawberries teach you to watch moisture. The next fruit teaches you that good watering alone cannot fix the wrong root environment. Raise your eyes from the low strawberry pot to a compact blueberry bush. A blueberry can look beautifully green in a nursery container and still disappoint later if you assume it wants the same root conditions as peppers, tomatoes, or a general-purpose patio planter. Blueberries are acid-loving plants, and a practical target for the root zone pH is about 4.5 to 5.5. That one number changes the entire soil conversation. This is why I would not buy a dwarf blueberry. Drop it into whatever potting mix happens to be left in the garage, and hope fertilizer solves everything. If the root zone pH is wrong, adding more fertilizer is not the simple fix people imagine. Start with a container mix intended for acid-loving plants or a blueberry-appropriate mix, and test when you are uncertain. The container actually gives you an advantage here because you have more control over the root medium than you would in a large area of naturally alkaline soil. But choose the cultivar before you choose the prettiest fruit photo on the tag. Dwarf or compact describes growth habit. It does not automatically mean the plant is adapted to every region of the United States. Check chilling needs, regional recommendations, mature size, and pollination information for the cultivar you are buying. Some blueberries can set fruit on their own, but compatible cultivars can improve pollination and fruiting in many situations. The label and your local extension recommendations matter more than a generic list on the internet. Now, look at the patio itself. Full sun on a garden site and reflected afternoon heat beside concrete are not always the same experience. If the leaves look stressed during the hottest part of the day and the container is heating rapidly, do not assume the answer is simply more water every hour. Check the root zone, check the pot. Check whether a wall is concentrating heat. In a very hot spell, moving a container to a position protected from the harshest late afternoon exposure can be more sensible than forcing a cooler climate berry to occupy the hottest corner. Keep the mix evenly moist without turning the root zone into a waterlogged container. Good drainage still matters. Watch the young leaves. Learn what normal growth looks like. A blueberry is one of the best plants for teaching container gardeners that green plant is not the same as correct root environment. And if blueberry sounds particular, the third fruit changes the mood completely because a warm patio corner can become part of the advantage. Now the patio needs its first visual anchor, a fig. A compact fig in a large container changes how the entire space feels. Suddenly, this is no longer a collection of berry pots. It begins to look like a small fruit garden. For a younger, relatively compact container fig, a 10 to 15 gallon pot can be a practical starting direction, with the understanding that the plant may need more root volume as it grows. Do not treat that number as the final home for every fig for the rest of its life. Watch the root mass, the growth rate, the cultivar, and how quickly the pot dries. A larger plant in a small container can become a daily emergency during hot weather. Drainage is non-negotiable. Use a mix that drains well, and make sure the holes at the bottom are open. Figs generally appreciate warmth and sun, but a root ball in a container is not the same as roots spreading through open ground. During fruit development, repeated severe drying can stress the plant. At the other extreme, keeping the mix constantly saturated because you are afraid of heat can create a different problem. Check the container instead of watering by fear. A 1 to 2 inch mulch layer can help slow surface moisture loss. Keep the mulch slightly away from the trunk. And pay attention to pot color and placement. A dark nursery pot pressed against a hot wall can experience a more intense root zone environment than the air temperature on your weather app suggests. Then comes the reward, and figs teach another useful lesson. Do not harvest only by color. Many cultivars give better clues through a combination of softness, a more relaxed or drooping neck, and fruit that no longer feels hard and immature. The exact color varies with the cultivar. A firm fig picked too early will not become the same fruit you hope to eat fresh on the patio. Wait, watch, touch the fruit gently. When a ripe fig is ready on the tree, the payoff feels completely different from pulling a hard fruit because you were impatient. The next crop is almost the opposite shape. No compact trunk, no small tree canopy, just canes. And a pruning mistake can follow you into the next harvest season. Move toward the support line and look at summer-bearing raspberries. To a beginner, a raspberry plant can look like a wall of similar stems. One cane leans left, another is green and vigorous, Another has already carried fruit. The temptation is to grab pruners and clean everything up. Stop there. Before cutting, know whether you are growing a summer-bearing type or a primer cane, fruiting raspberry. Summer-bearing red raspberries typically fruit on second-year canes, while primer cane fruiting types can be managed differently. That distinction should come before the pruning cut, not after it. Read the cultivar information and use a pruning approach that matches the fruiting habit. Containers also change the scale of the job. Raspberry roots need real volume. Oregon State Extension notes that a pot or raised bed, at least about 2 feet deep, is appropriate because raspberries are relatively deep-rooted and a 20 to 30-gallon container can work well with careful pruning. That is very different from squeezing a vigorous cane crop into a decorative 5-gallon pot and wondering why summer becomes difficult. Support the canes before they fall across the walkway. Keep enough space for air to move. Remove damaged or diseased material when you see it, and do not allow the center to become a wet, tangled mass simply because more canes sounds like more berries. On a small patio, access matters. You need to reach the plant, inspect the leaves, water the root zone, and pick fruit without wrestling with the entire container. Moisture becomes especially important during fruiting. A row of raspberries in the ground has a different root environment from a single large pot. The container cannot search the surrounding soil for water. During hot weather, check it, rather than assuming yesterday's routine is still enough. And when berries ripen, notice how the fruit releases. A ripe raspberry generally separates much more easily than a fruit you have to tug and twist. Do not turn harvesting into a strength test. If the berry resists, give the plant another look later. The fifth fruit removes most of that cane confusion. In fact, when it is ready, the best harvest clue may be sitting below the plant. Stop looking up, look down. Ground cherries are one of the best changes of pace in a summer container garden because the fruit hides inside a papery husk and fully ripe fruit commonly drops from the plant. The husk dries, the fruit falls. Suddenly your harvest routine is not searching a trellis or reaching through canes. It is checking beneath a sprawling plant. That does not mean you should ignore the container surface for a week. Keep the area reasonably clean and collect ripe fallen fruit promptly. A layer of clean mulch can help keep dropped fruit away from dirty, wet mix. Open the papery husk and inspect the fruit before eating or storing it. The small size of the fruit fools people into choosing a tiny decorative pot, but a ground cherry plant can sprawl and needs room. In garden spacing guidance, plants are often given roughly 18 to 24 inches in all directions. On a patio, that should remind you to think about the plant's habit, not the diameter of one fruit. Keep moisture reasonably, even for good fruit quality. But remember that this is a warm season plant with stronger heat tolerance than some of the cooler climate berries on our list. Too much nitrogen can also give you a beautiful leafy plant that is slow to shift attention toward fruit. This is a perfect example of why lush, green growth is not always the payoff we are trying to create. And when the husks become dry and fruit begins to drop, do not yank immature fruit simply because you are ready to harvest. Let the plant show you the clue. Small fruit does not always mean a small plant, and the next cane crop makes that patio space mistake even more obvious. Now clear the walkway and think about your elbows, your sleeves, and the coffee cup in your hand. A blackberry planted beside the narrowest path may seem charming in spring. By midsummer, an unmanaged plant can turn every walk past the container into a negotiation. This is where compact growth habits and thornless cultivars become practical patio decisions, not marketing words. Check the mature habit before buying. A thornless blackberry can be much more pleasant beside living space, but thornless does not mean needs no training. Give the canes support, tie or guide growth while it is manageable. Keep the walkway open before the plant decides where the walkway should be. Use a container with enough root volume for the cultivar and maintain good drainage. Do not crowd a cluster of canes into a pot so tightly that airflow disappears. A patio already creates close quarters. Your job is to prevent close quarters from becoming a damp tangle of leaves and fruit. As berries darken, avoid assuming that the first color change means every fruit is at peak eating quality. Ripeness cues vary by cultivar, and blackberries can deepen in flavor and soften as they fully ripen. Learn the fruit on your plant. Pick gently. Remove damaged or overripe berries. And if birds discover the crop before you do, address protection before the entire harvest window passes. The bigger lesson is design. Ask yourself, will I still enjoy this plant when I have to squeeze past it every morning? A fruit can be productive and still be the wrong crop for a narrow path. Patio gardening is not only about what grows, it is about what you can live with, reach, maintain, and harvest. By now, the patio looks productive. Low strawberries carry fruit. A blueberry bush has its own acidic root environment. The fig creates a small tree layer. Raspberry and blackberry canes are using support. Ground cherries are hiding harvests below their leaves. Then July delivers the test that exposes almost every weak container plan. The hottest week arrives. In the morning, everything can look normal. By mid-afternoon, the concrete is radiating heat. A west-facing wall feels warm from several feet away. A small pot that was heavy after watering yesterday now feels surprisingly light. Leaves on the most exposed plant lose their comfortable posture. This is the moment when many gardeners make one of two mistakes. They keep following the same once-a-day routine no matter what the containers are showing. Or they panic and flood everything equally. Neither approach starts with observation. A watering schedule tells you when to look. The container tells you whether to water. Begin with a morning walk. Push a finger about 1 inch into the mix where that quick check is useful. For small containers, you can safely lift, learn their weight after thorough watering, and compare that feeling as the mix dries. Look at the plant, but do not wait for dramatic wilt as your only signal. Check how quickly water enters the mix. If it immediately runs down the side of a badly dried root ball, slow down and water in stages so the root zone can actually rehydrate. For containers with proper drainage, a thorough watering should wet the root zone and begin to drain from the bottom. Then let the crop and the mix guide the next check. Do not give the same volume to a small Alpine strawberry pot, a 20-gallon raspberry container, and a fig simply because the pots sit 6 feet apart. During a heat wave, containers may need extra attention. Hanging baskets and smaller pots dry faster than plants in the ground, and extension guidance specifically recommends checking them frequently, testing moisture with a finger, and lifting small pots to judge weight. That is not a complicated technology. It is a better habit. Now look at reflected heat. A dark plastic pot on hot concrete beside a western wall is experiencing a microclimate. If a cooler climate berry repeatedly struggles in that exact position, consider moving the container away from the harshest late afternoon exposure. Use open shade from a structure, filtered protection, or shade cloth where appropriate. But do not turn a fruiting plant into a plant living in darkness. The goal is to reduce damaging heat stress, not remove the light the crop needs. Mulch can help reduce evaporation, but mulch does not replace checking the container. A larger pot can buffer moisture, changes better than a tiny pot, but a larger canopy also uses water. A drip emitter can be useful, but a clogged emitter is only useful at giving you false confidence. Look at the soil, look at drainage, look at the plant, and check again later in the day during extreme heat, especially the smallest containers and the hottest positions. Not because every pot automatically needs a second watering, but because conditions have changed. The weather changed, the plant grew, the fruit load changed. Your June routine is not a contract with July. Here is the twist. Not every fruit on this patio wants to escape summer warmth. One container may actually deserve a warmer, brighter position than the berries we just protected. Consider a patio pomegranate. Pomegranates generally favor warmth, sun, and well-drained conditions, and they can be grown in containers. But the cultivar decision matters enormously. Do not see the words dwarf pomegranate and assume you have automatically chosen the best small plant for edible fruit. Some dwarf ornamental selections produce fruit that is not the eating experience you expected. Choose a cultivar for your actual goal, and check mature size and fruit characteristics before buying. A stable container is important because this plant can become a woody shrub or small tree form. Good drainage matters. Monitor the root zone during hot weather, because a sun-loving plant can still be stressed by an undersized container that dries severely. Loving warmth does not make a plant immune to container limitations. Pomegranate also shows why we should assign jobs to patio microclimates. The warm corner that was difficult for a currant may be much more logical for a pomegranate in a region where the cultivar is adapted. That does not mean you should place it against the hottest surface you can find and ignore it. It means the same sunlight problem does not have the same answer for every crop. Watch the flowers. Watch developing fruit. Avoid assuming that more nitrogen and more leafy growth automatically move you closer to harvest. Maintain the shape you can manage and remove dead or damaged wood. If you are training a compact plant for patio use, decide whether you want a small, tree-like shape or a multi-stemmed shrub, and prune with that goal in mind. And remember that pomegranates do not continue ripening the same way after early picking that some other fruits might. Cultivar and regional season matter. Learn the proper harvest cues for the selection you grow instead of cutting a fruit early, only because the skin has become attractive. Now that the warm corner has a job, there is still a thin strip of patio space we have barely touched. Go low again, but this time do not expect supermarket-sized berries. Alpine strawberries earn their place by being small. Their fruit is usually much smaller than the large strawberries sold in grocery stores, and that is not a sign of failure. The appeal is the compact habit, the aromatic berries, and the ability to fit a fruiting plant along a low edge where a large cane or tree would make no sense. Think of them as an edible border for the patio. A few compact plants can soften the edge of containers or occupy a narrow zone near a path. You still need to watch moisture, especially if the plants are in small pots, but we do not need to repeat the entire strawberry lesson. By now you already know that low root volume gives you less room for neglect. The mistake here is expectation. If you plant Alpine strawberries and wait for fist-sized fruit, you will call a healthy plant disappointing. If you understand the crop, those small berries become the reason to slow down and look closely. Harvest them ripe. Check frequently, because the fruit is small and easy to miss under foliage. And notice what just happened to our patio design. The low edge now has a fruit crop without blocking the walkway or competing with the fig canopy. We have used the low edge, the warm corner, and the cane line. The biggest unused space is no longer on the floor. Look up. A container grape changes the geometry of a patio. One large pot occupies one footprint, but a trained vine can use a trellis above it. This is where people make the mistake of buying the grape first and planning the support later. Reverse that order. Build or choose a strong support before the vine fills the space. Make sure the structure can handle mature growth, wind movement, and the weight of foliage and fruit. For a vine you intend to maintain long-term in a container, think in terms of substantial root volume. A 15 to 20-gallon container or larger can be a practical direction depending on cultivar and management. The exact need changes with the vine, climate, pruning, and how long you expect it to remain in that pot. Do not assume a 5-gallon bucket is a permanent home for a mature grapevine just because the young plant fits today. Use a well-drained growing medium and give the vine appropriate light for the cultivar. Train growth rather than allowing every shoot to become part of a green knot. Grapes require pruning and deliberate structure if you want to manage them in limited space. The point of vertical gardening is control, not simply allowing a plant to climb until you can no longer reach it. When fruit begins to color, remember that color alone is not the only harvest cue across every grape cultivar. Taste matters. Cultivar characteristics matter. A cluster can look attractive before the flavor has fully developed. Learn when your grape is supposed to ripen in your region and sample thoughtfully rather than stripping the vine, because the first berries changed color. Now, stand back. The patio floor did not become wider, but the vine used height. This is the moment a small space gardener begins to see the entire area differently. Vertical space makes the patio feel larger, but the next fruit reminds us that no clever container can erase regional climate. This is where I want you to stop copying a garden from another state. Gooseberries can be wonderful container fruits in suitable climates, but I would not present them as a universal recommendation for every scorching patio in America. Ribes crops, including gooseberries and currants, are generally associated with cooler growing conditions than figs or pomegranates. The cultivar and local climate matter. If your summers are cooler, the plant may be comfortable in a position that would be punishing on a hot inland patio. In warmer conditions, protection from the harshest afternoon exposure may help, but there is a limit to what clever placement can correct. A container does not cancel climate. Choose a cultivar with local adaptation in mind. Check regional recommendations. Give the plant room for air movement and enough access to prune and harvest. Do not press a thorny gooseberry into the narrowest walkway unless you enjoy learning lessons with your forearms. Watch leaf stress as summer intensifies. Check moisture, but avoid the reflex of drowning a heat-stressed plant without checking the root zone. Sometimes the first correction is location. A position with morning sun and protection later in the day may be more appropriate in a warmer region than the brightest reflected corner on the patio. This is not a weakness in the crop. It is a reminder that a useful gardening list must tell you when not to copy it. A plant that performs beautifully in a cool summer climate may not deserve your limited space if your patio stays brutally hot for weeks. The next fruit creates a different surprise. Most people picture it as a tree far too large for a patio, but the word dwarf changes the starting point, not the need for long-term management. A compact or dwarf mulberry selection can bring a very different kind of fruit to a container garden. The key word is selection. Do not buy an ordinary large-growing mulberry and expect a pot to magically transform its genetics into a patio plant. Check mature size and growth habit. Know what you are buying. Use a large, stable container with excellent drainage and expect to manage the canopy and roots over time. Dwarf does not mean permanently tiny without pruning or attention. It means you may have a more manageable starting habit or mature size, depending on the cultivar. Mulberries also introduce a patio problem nobody mentions when showing only perfect fruit close-ups. Ripe berries can drop and stain. Think about placement. A productive mulberry directly beside white outdoor cushions, pale stone, or a high-traffic doorway may create a cleaning routine you did not plan to grow. Birds may notice the fruit quickly. Harvest ripe berries carefully because they can be delicate, and use them promptly. Keep the area below the plant clean. If fruit is dropping, that is information about both ripeness and the way you should manage the patio surface. This is why worth growing depends on the person and the space. Someone with a large washable patio corner may love a compact mulberry. Someone protecting pale furniture may decide the fruit belongs farther from the seating area. The 12th fruit does not ask for the hottest corner or the tallest trellis. Its best location may be decided by what happens after 3 in the afternoon. Watch the afternoon light. Currants are another crop where regional honesty matters. In cooler summer regions, currants can be a rewarding fruiting shrub. On a hot patio, however, the rule, more sun automatically means more fruit, can become a bad habit. Look at the microclimate after 3 o'clock. Does the western wall keep radiating heat? Does the concrete remain hot? Does the container sit in direct afternoon sun after receiving strong light all morning? A position with morning sun and protection from punishing late-day heat may be more useful for a currant in a warmer location. That does not mean every currant should be put in deep shade. It means light decisions should respond to climate. Someone gardening near a cool coast and someone gardening on a hot inland patio are not working with the same summer. Give the plant airflow, maintain even moisture without creating a saturated root zone. Use a container large enough to support the shrub you actually selected. And again, check local regulations and regional guidance for ribes crops where relevant, because disease-related restrictions or recommendations can vary by location and species. The bigger lesson is simple. The brightest corner is not automatically the most valuable corner. Sometimes, the best fruit position is the one that remains usable after the harshest part of the afternoon begins. Only one crop remains, and it takes us back to the bare vertical edge from the first minute. The floor is full. The warm corner has a purpose. The low edge carries strawberries. The canes have support. The grape is using height. Now return to the wall. In the right climate, passion fruit can turn a strong vertical structure into a living fruiting wall. And that is exactly why people fall in love with it. The flowers are dramatic. The vine is vigorous. The fruit feels almost too exotic for a small home patio. But do not fall in love with the fruit and forget the vine. Passion fruit can grow aggressively under favorable conditions. Start with a strong trellis, not a delicate decorative panel. Give the roots substantial volume. For a vigorous vine, you hope to maintain longer term in a container. A 20-gallon container or larger is a practical direction, depending on the species, cultivar, climate, and management. Excellent drainage is essential. Climate is the first filter. Passion fruit is not the crop for every patio in America. Species and cultivars differ in cold tolerance and heat response. In colder regions, overwintering becomes part of the plan. In warm regions, vigorous growth can become the management challenge. Check what type you are growing before treating passion fruit as one universal plant. Pollination can also vary. Some types can set fruit more readily with their own pollen, while others benefit from or require compatible pollination conditions. Do not wait until the vine is covered in flowers to ask whether your cultivar has a pollination issue. Read the plant information early. Train the vine while stems are young and manageable. Spread growth across the support. Prune according to the type and local growing pattern so the plant does not become an unreachable mat above the patio. Water based on the container, especially during active growth and fruit development, but keep drainage working. Then the open loop from the beginning finally closes. That bare edge was never useless. It was simply waiting for a crop that grows differently from a strawberry, blueberry, or fig. This is not the fruit for every patio in America, but in the right climate, it proves the final lesson of this garden. Unused vertical space can be just as valuable as another patch of floor. And now the real question is not which of these 13 fruits is best. The real question is which 3 or 4 match the patio you actually have. So before you buy another pot, make the choice this way. If you are a beginner and you want the fastest path to understanding fruit in containers, start with one crop that gives clear feedback. Everbearing strawberries can teach moisture observation and frequent harvesting. A locally suitable compact blackberry or raspberry can teach support and cane management, but only if you are willing to give it adequate root volume. A blueberry can be rewarding if you are prepared to build the acidic root environment it needs, instead of treating it like a generic patio plant. If your patio is extremely small, think in layers. Alpine strawberries can use a low edge. Standard strawberries can stay in lower containers. Ground cherries can work when you give their spreading habit enough width. And a grape can use vertical space when a strong support structure and a suitable cultivar make sense. Small space gardening is not about choosing only tiny plants. It is about controlling where each plant grows. If your patio is hot, do not immediately assume every fruit needs shade. Consider a suitable fig or pomegranate for the warmer position. In an appropriate warm climate, passion fruit may use a vertical edge. But remember the distinction we learned during the hottest week. Warm air, hot reflected surfaces, and an overheated root ball are not identical conditions. A heat-loving crop still needs a functional root zone. If you garden in a cooler summer climate, your options change. Currants, gooseberries, raspberries, and regionally adapted blueberries may deserve more attention. The fruit list should change when the climate changes. That is not inconsistency. That is gardening. If your biggest problem is lack of floor space, choose by growth direction. Strawberries use the low layer. Caneberries use a support line. Grapes use a trellis. Passion fruit may build a wall in the right climate. A fig or dwarf mulberry can become a large container focal plant. You do not need all of them. In fact, the patio may work better when you choose fewer crops and give each one enough root volume, access, and attention. Now, picture the same patio from the opening. The concrete has not moved. The railing is in the same place. The wall is still the same width, but the low edge is carrying strawberries. The blueberry has its acidic growing mix. A fig anchors a larger container. Raspberry or blackberry canes are tied where you can reach them. A warmer corner belongs to a crop that can use it more logically. The grape climbs instead of spreading across the floor. And in the right region, a passion fruit vine turns the final bare edge into a fruiting wall. The patio never became larger. You simply stopped asking every fruit plant to live in the same container, the same light, and the same summer routine. That may be the most important lesson in container fruit gardening. A 10-gallon pot is not a 20-gallon pot. A shallow strawberry root zone is not a raspberry root system. A blueberry is not a pomegranate. Morning sun beside an open railing is not the same as late afternoon heat reflected from brick. And a plant growing 6 feet upward is using space differently from a plant spreading 6 feet across your walkway. Once you notice those differences, the patio becomes easier to read. Your morning check becomes more useful. You stop watering because the clock says 8 and start checking because the containers are telling different stories. You stop buying every beautiful fruit plant and begin choosing the crops that actually have a job in your space. Then summer harvest becomes less about chasing one dramatic basket and more about repeated small moments. A ripe strawberry under a leaf, a blueberry cluster beginning to color, a raspberry that releases without a fight, a ground cherry waiting under a dry husk, a fig softening on the tree, a grape tasted at the right stage, a few fruits carried inside in a small bowl. That is a productive patio. Not because it produced an impossible amount of fruit from a tiny space, not because every crop loved every summer, and not because one watering trick solved 13 different plants. It is productive because the space was used intelligently. Your patio does not need to behave like an orchard. It only needs to use every small growing condition more intelligently. And that may be enough to put fresh summer fruit within arm's reach.